Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martorano and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi everybody, welcome again to the Behavioral Corner. It's me, Steve Martorano, your host and guide. What we do here is talk about everything. It's the podcast about everything because everything affects our behavioral health. The whole shooting match is made possible by our underwriter partners, Retreat Behavioral Health, good people, experts in what they do, great partners for this program. You'll find out more about them a little bit down the road. You know, we spend a lot of time here on the podcast talking about substance abuse, among many other things, but we often find ourselves dealing with clinicians and treatment and what's available out there, maybe causes, all of which we hope has been informational and helpful because it is. You got to know your subject before you can do anything about it. But we also never want to lose sight of the fact that there's another story to tell as well. It's not all about the horrors of substance abuse. There are millions of stories of successful recovery. It's very important to remind people this is possible, and it's accomplished by, as I said, millions of people all the time. And so we call these episodes Voices in Recovery, just to remind us of all of what is possible. Our guest is a perfect example of this. Colleen Elliott is 8 years sober now. That constitutes success and long-term recovery as far as I'm concerned. And she has used her experience with substance abuse and recovery in her field of work now, which is as a certified recovery specialist, in addition to which she is a house manager of a sober living facility, which is no stranger to this program. We've known about Grace House through Grace Schober and her family for a long time, and Colleen is a house manager. We're going to get into that as well. So let me welcome Colleen to the corner. Hi, Colleen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
I got all that, most of that right, I think.
Yes, you did.
You're like a walk around advertisement for this kind of a topic. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up and what the family was like, and if you can, a little bit of your history with substance abuse.
Okay, so I grew up in New Jersey, a place called Roselle, which was kind of close, but it was like Elizabeth, Newark. That's where people mostly know. I was born into like a family with 2 brothers and a sister. But when I was like 5, my uncle passed away from alcoholism, and I didn't understand what alcoholism was. And my cousins moved in, so I always say like I'm a baby of 7. So growing up, I was the baby of everybody, and I feel like there was always addiction in my family. But my sister struggled for years, and she's passed away from this disease. But when I started looking like at myself, I see all my patterns of what alcoholism is as a young child. I got married. I have 2 beautiful kids. I have an ex-husband, but my substance abuse got very bad, like stealing a lot. I called in like fraudulent prescriptions because I worked in the dental field. And there was a lot of consequences that started coming. So I went to like my first treatment center, came out, I went back home, and said like my choice of substance was opiates so I could still drink. So I was manipulating all then. Then I went to like a sober living in Jersey for maybe like a month, but didn't really, stick to what people suggested. And then I ended up back in another, in a behavioral health place in Jersey, and they sent me to retreat for my first time. And I kind of did what they told me. I went to meetings, got into the sober house, and didn't really practice program recovery. I was still doing my behaviors never changed. And then I left sober living on my own and started using for 7 months. And it got very bad quickly this time. My kids hadn't talked to me in like 2 years. There was nobody wanted anything to do with me. My brothers and sisters were like, we're done. So I entered back into retreat in 2015. So my sober date is St. Patrick's Day for an Irish Catholic girl like me.
Perfect.
And this time when I went, I listened to what people were telling me. Like they told me like you have to change your behaviors, and like you said before, like there's millions of people that got sober, and I used to think that the 12 steps were not going to work for me, right? But then they would tell me that it doesn't say your name in the book, that you're not going to get sober. So, like just try it and see what happens. So I went back to the Grace House and started my journey. And, things have gotten so much better in my life since I decided to turn my will over. So,
yeah, that surrender is a very big part of this, understanding that what you're doing is not working. And so why not just stop what you're doing and give it up to something else? It's a very mysterious process. You talk about being in and out of a couple of treatment facilities, and nothing surprises me anymore when friends of mine who don't know about this disease go, "Come on, Steve, people go 10 times in their treatment, it doesn't work." I tell them, well, it doesn't work until it works. And the mysterious thing for me still remains that moment when, as you just said, you decided to start, okay, this time I'll listen. I wish we could, maybe you have an opinion. I've never been able to really put my finger on what that moment is when people go, I'm going to really try it. Do you remember that? Was it a gradual thing when you went, this time I'll pay attention? Or did it just occur to you once, as a flash of light or something? How did that process begin for you?
I think my process started when I had to get a job to pay for my ex-husband had given me the first month to stay in my recovery house. And he said that if you choose not to go to work, then you're going to be homeless, and that's your problem. So I would walk to work every day. It was like 3 miles, and I had like 4 songs on like this little iPod shuffle, but every day it got easier. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give it 30 days. And then things just started changing. Right. And I don't think there was ever an aha, like they say that, this white light or burning bush, none of that happened, but life got better. And I think that's what let me keep on going, because things started to change in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing because it's so simple when you think about it. You begin to change we know what cognitive behavior therapy is. When you begin thinking differently, you begin acting differently. And then when you begin to see that acting differently results in positive outcomes, that's reinforcing.
Right.
And I know that there are people that resist treatment because they think that they're supposed to wait for the white light to flash. And it really doesn't work like that.
No.
Let me back up just a second before we move on to a little more about your experiences and talk about your family background. You say that there was addiction and death in your family history. Looking back on it, we know that there is a lot of that evidence of family histories that are filled with this stuff. Do you think that it's a learned behavior? Did you think you learned the behavior of addiction, or do you really think you were sort of born into it?
I think I was born into it, but just the addictive behaviors. Like one story in my life when I used to think is this like a genetic thing or something? My niece, who was also she was an addict, for my sister, she had gotten in a really bad accident, and was beaten and was in a hospital, and she went to she was in a mental health hospital because she was only 12 years old after this accident happened. So for 2 years, I was her health proxy. She lived in California. But when she came out, the first thing she did was go back to drugs. She didn't remember anything from her childhood, didn't really remember me, but she realized that drugs made her feel good. And then she overdosed 3 days of being out of there. So I believe that it's in our system, in my family.
Yeah. Yeah. Believe me, this, as you know, they do a lot of studies about this. If they could figure that out, how to turn the switch on, they would be turning the switch on.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. There are many, we know there's still unfortunate stigmas attached to this whole process, but they're wearing away, I think, over the years. But there are myths about it that I think can hinder all of this. And for me, the largest myth about how you get where you are is that somehow, you do this and then bang, you're better. Talk about how your experience with recovery as a process. It's not 28 days here or just a meeting every week. Talk a little bit about the process, but particularly taking us up to that sober living aspect.
Okay, yeah, so I went into a sober living house and I didn't believe that, I mean, I was like, I had no other place to go, right? I was homeless, let's just be honest. Like I had no choices and I went there. But those people taught me how to live life, right? They taught me like how to get in a routine every day, and also not just go to 28 days, but like going to an outpatient afterwards. That's where I met most of my sober friends in the beginning, was like in the outpatient program, you know, stepping down into an environment that was safe for me. Because if I went home, the people at home don't really understand when I say I'm struggling. Like if I come home and say, oh my God, I want to use today, they have no idea. But being in that sober living house, those people knew what I was talking about, and they would be able to there to listen to me and like say, hey, let's go to a meeting. Why don't we do this? And also like my family giving me like no ultimatum, like it was like, either you do this or you don't. But I, like with my kids, my ex-husband was like, you're not going to talk to them if you continue to do what you're doing. And he gave me 1 day a week that I was allowed to call them at 7 o'clock. And if I didn't call, then you wait till next week. So I think that's what it was. And living in the sober living house taught me how to, you know, remember how to do chores, you know, just being with a bunch of women and learning life all over again, because they do say when you stop your drugs, when you start your drugs is where your brain goes. And I was probably like a, you know, 25-year-old when I first came out of treatment, you know?
Yeah.
So,
How old were you had 2 children, did you say?
yes.
Yeah. How old were they for the most part during this process?
When I went to the treatment, when I went to the retreat the first time, my daughter started high school. She was 14. I think my son was 13.
Yeah.
And then it just evolved that they just thought they were not going to really see me, you know, ever again.
Yeah. For children of substance abusers, there's never an optimum time to deal with that, but it's particularly difficult when they're young teenagers, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So as the avenues get cut off, you know, people think tough love is just like being, you know, I'm going to be tough here. What they're really doing is, well, they're saving themselves, number one, but they're also cutting off all these avenues of escape that addicts want to use. And so it sort of forces you in that position. How long did it take you to get over the notion, for instance, at an AA meeting, your first experience in AA, or moving into sober living? Did you experience that moment where you looked around and went, I'm not like these people? What? How long did it take you to go, oh, yeah, I am?
I think it took me, but I think when I first got sober, I went to a lot of speaker meetings, the first, like when I came out of treatment, because I wanted to hear other people's experience. And I also remember like being at like some of these meetings, like, I'm not going to have anything in common with this speaker. And then she would say the same story as me, right? And I was like, wow, somebody else, or like getting a sponsor and being able to sit down with them and tell them stuff that I was feeling. And she got it. She understood what I was feeling, right? So I think it took a little while for me to really think about that, but I do remember like saying, oh, these people, I guess they are like me. You know, they are, I have the same tendencies and behaviors that they have.
Isn't it remarkable that people deep in substance abuse drag themselves to, let's say, a meeting, and their immediate reaction. Now, think about it. They've dragged themselves to a meeting for people who have substance abuse issues. And your first reaction early on is, I don't have anything in common with them. That's an amazing process, but it shows us what drugs and alcohol do to your brain. They just lie to you.
Yeah,
I mean,
they do.
You would think there's no other group more suited for you to be in than people in the same situation.
Right.
So when that starts to wear away, then I think the benefits of something like AA begin to take hold. Are you convinced that you could not have gotten sober without AA?
I've tried it every other way I possibly could. I did it Colleen's way all the time. And because those steps are in line for me to just, it's changing my life. It's a design for living. I've tried it other ways. For me personally, it was my way of staying sober. I do believe there's other pathways people use, but my pathway was to go through like AA and the 12 steps and continue to do that every day in my life, you know, practice the steps. So that's what made me
We've had we do lots of shows. I mean, your colleague Grace Schober as joins us many times to just talk about the individual steps. She's a firm believer in AA. I tell people I am not been in recovery myself, but I tell people at this point now who go, come on, AA doesn't work. I say, well, it works for the people it works for. I mean, there's just no other way to describe AA. Let's talk about that period of time about sober living, or before we do that, when did you, as you began seeing your life get better, when did you pivot and say, this is something I may want to devote my life to, work? Tell me about that period of time.
I think it was when I got the job at the Grace. I was out of the Grace House for like a year, and I was offered a position as an assistant manager of the house, and I started liking it. Right, I started thinking, well, all right, and then I also went back to school and worked for a retreat after I was out of treatment for 18 months, and I think that's when I realized, like, this is something I want to do. This is something that I think I can share some things with people, and maybe be able to, like, even just put a seed in their mind about how great recovery is.
Very common. It's I think it's less common today than it used to be, but a lot of people were on that path. They wind up in substance abuse treatment as work. And so I think some people, that's okay. I think some people think that is sort of an extension of the recovery, and it may certainly be, but it's interesting that something as terrible as substance abuse should really put you in a place ultimately where you find out what you're good at.
Right. It's true. I mean, I didn't think I was, and then I just kind of started realizing, like, all right, I have something to offer, right? I think I may have something to offer to some people, especially like when I went to work for the Grace House, I had something to offer these women and tell them my experience and strength and hope.
In terms of work, regardless of substance abuse or not, it's always the dream of all of us to wind up with some kind of vocation that we're good at and can make a living at. And so it's strange to have to go through what people do to wind up sober in doing it, but life is funny that way. So our guest, incidentally, Colleen Elliott, she is a certified recovery specialist and a house manager of a sober living facility, Grace's House. What does a house manager do?
So I try and guide the women. So I feel like if I'm asking them to do something, I should be also doing that for my recovery. So weekly we have a house meeting with the ladies, and they, share what we like the 12 steps in the Grace House. If you want to come to the Grace House, it has to be NAAA. We even allow Dharma, and we encourage them to get a sponsor. We share our experience once a week with the ladies. And every day they send us an update of what's going on in their day. So I respond to them usually at the end of the day, but I check to make sure that they're being accountable to themselves. That's what I'm really there for, to guide them and give them direction or suggestions on, job situations, or if they have a doctor's appointment, make sure that they're making their appointments and things like that.
Yeah. And do any of these women have their children with them during this period of time, or no?
No, children are not allowed, aren't at the house. I mean, some people are rebuilding their relationships, and that's one thing that we do in our house. We want our ladies to start rebuilding relationships with their families. So even if they come in and they're on like a 21-day blackout, they just got out of treatment, we like them to, if they're going to go out with their family, we welcome that. We feel like that should be something that they're able to do.
Let's talk about rebuilding relationships, because we know this is a disease of the family, and they need to recover as well, in a sense, from the trauma of seeing, in your case, mom and go down that road. How did that process begin for you? How do you begin to build relationship, but particularly with your children? How did you begin to do that?
Yeah, so I would call them once a week, and their dad allowed them to come visit me twice. The first year I was sober, I think. And when I was going through it, I was like, I can't believe he's keeping them from me. Thank God that man did it that way, right? Because I was able to regain this. So showing up for my kids. And I remember I would call up every time and be like, oh, I have 30 days sober. I have 6 days sober. And somebody said, why aren't you asking them what's up with them? Right. So it got to a point where we started talking more. My son, I know when we first would meet up, he wouldn't even want to hug me. I had cooties. He'd be like, oh, wouldn't share a drink with me. Today, my son calls me every day, FaceTimes me. He's 20 4 years old now. So like, it's been a process, and being able to make an amends to my children. And I remember telling them what my choice of substance was, and it was heroin. And I didn't know how to tell them this, right? And I kept on thinking they're going to think of that seedy person they see in the movies. And my son said to me, "You don't look like a heroin addict." And I asked him what did heroin addict look like, and he told me what, like in the movies, a seedy person, right? And then he started realizing that this can happen to anybody, and then my kids, know to watch themselves with drinking or anything like that. I guide them, but I can't keep them from doing what they're going to do. They're adult children, but my relationship with them today is amazing. We talk all the time. I go there usually every other month, or they come here to visit me. So we rebuilt that. And my ex-husband and I have truly like gained back a friendship, and being able to watch our kids together. And I just give him a lot of credit for being able to take that burden on himself.
I imagine that during that process, you have to really manage not only your expectations, but your other emotions. It must have been both frustrating, and I'm sure you got angry at times, thinking why are they still punishing me? Why are they still punishing me? When did that go away? When did you stop thinking of yourself as the victim and move on?
I think it was when I started realizing that they were trusting me more. When I would first go visit my daughter, say, I think she was probably like 17 or 18, and I would take the train. I didn't have a car at the time. I would take the train to Jersey, and she started leaving her wallet in the car, right? And I started saying, oh, well, this is getting better. She's trusting me more. I think it was when I started building trust back. Like my brothers, it was harder for me to get back in with two of my brothers, really didn't want anything to do with me, because they thought I was going to do it all over again, But when I was like 5 years sober, my one brother called me and said, "Hey, I just want to tell you, like, I'm really proud of you." And I'm going to start crying. And he said, "But I'm also getting help now because my mental health isn't good." So he kind of understood it after that, and like rebuilding that relationship, it was amazing. I'm sorry.
Do you have, well, it's an emotional story. Do you have the occasion to speak to people and tell them how possible it is for anybody to wind up in the situation you did? Because your son was confused. He looked at, that's mom. I mean, maybe she could be an alcoholic, maybe she could be abusing pills, but heroin. What do you tell people about how easy it is for all kinds of people to wind up in this kind of shape?
Yeah, I think I try to explain that it really can help I try to give examples of different people that I have met throughout my journey of sobriety, and different backgrounds that they came from, and how it just, it can take over anybody's life. You can get on a pain pill and it can just starts out like that, right? You can't get the medication, and because there are so many different, everybody kind of, the stereotype is that we're all like low lives, right? These addicts and alcoholics, I used to think that, the alcoholic was under a bridge with a bottle, right? Yep. But that's not it. But that was my perception. So what I have to do in life is get out there to show people that we do recover. And I try and make any kind of recovery event that they have just show up and say, we can do this. We can definitely change people's outlook on us. So
8 years is a healthy time to be not using, and congratulations for that. What can you tell us about the urges to use, even just the thought? Do they still occur? Do they occur less frequency, or is that part of your life gone?
No, it's definitely, I don't obsess about it anymore. I do think about it. I'm not saying I do it every single day, but I do think about it. Or like, if I'm out with friends that are not alcoholics and they're having a drink, I'd be like, that would be really good now. But it's like a fleeting thought, but I have a support system that I would call. I was having a difficult time about a year and a half ago. And if it wasn't for the 3 women that I called, I was making my mind up that I'm just going to go get a drink. Right. And that was my thing. But I reached out, they called me back immediately, talked me through it, came to my house, went to a meeting with me. So like, because of that sober support, I think that's how I get through any kind of anything I'm struggling with in life.
Yeah. The other thing people need to know is that if they're going to be successful at this, they've got to understand that there are people that they can rely on.
Yeah.
because it seems alone, when you're using it's a lonely thing. And the idea that you have to do this by yourself, I guess, stops people sometimes because they just go, I can't do it by myself.
Right.
It's an amazing process, in a sense. And tell me if you think I'm wrong here. Those moments where you think, well, it'd be nice to have a glass of wine here, while dangerous because you might give into them, are also a kind of way to remind yourself, right?
Yeah, it sometimes reminds me like maybe I'm not putting as much time in my recovery right now, right? Because I get stressed. Like you're working, I do 3 12-hours and a 4, and sometimes I just feel like on Fridays I just want to relax, and then I can start getting. When I start, even my roommate can tell my behaviors. She'll tell me I'm isolating too much, and then which is good. She reminds me she's my support, and then it reminds me that I got to get more active. I got to start reaching out to more women again and start getting back into what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I only mentioned that notion of urges because it's kind of a lie that they go away for everybody. You probably don't, but it is instructive to notice how they can wind up, getting you back on track. A reminder that I got to keep working at this. Finally, let's take a moment to talk about what you do as a certified recovery specialist. Do you meet with individuals or in groups? What are you doing?
We do groups, and then we do individuals for like an hour a week, and we go over like a recovery plan, make sure that they're on, they're compliant with their legal obligations, make sure that they're compliant with their medications, make sure their appointments are set up, that they're, I talked about making meetings, seeing a sponsor, and just try and guide them. And sometimes I take them to a meeting. If they don't have a ride, I can pick them up, take them to a meeting, because as a certified recovery specialist, you're allowed to take your client out and go into meetings and recovery events.
Colleen Elliott, appreciate your time. I know you're busy. I don't want to put you on the spot here now, but if there's somebody on the brink, and don't know, really on the brink. They know it's not working. They know they can't keep doing it. What do you advise them to do first thing to do? Who do you call? Where do you go? What do you think?
I think if they were working a program of recovery and they, are having a breakdown or whatever, maybe call a sober support. But a lot of times, maybe if you're not, I think there's so many programs now, like through the hospitals, like emergency rooms. If somebody really wants to get some kind of treatment, there's like programs like Warm Handoff, Second Chance that will, find them a place to go to. Because if you don't have the support, going into a hospital will at least allow somebody to come in and be your support and try and aid you in getting into treatment. Yeah,
it's improved vastly over the last several decades about the idea of getting help. And I always like to say that it's important to realize that treatment and sobriety, they don't deliver that to the house. You've got to make that first step. So great advice. Make a phone call, ask a friend, your physician, but don't sit around waiting for somebody to bring it to your front door.
Right.
Colleen, thanks so much. We appreciate it. I can't believe, how long have you been at Grace House as a manager now?
About probably 7 years. Like I was assistant manager, and then I moved when her parents decided, when they stepped back, her mom made me a manager. So Grace and I have been doing it together for like just the two of us for 4 years. And Grace is also my sponsor. So it's kind of like works out that way. She was the one who told me, this is what you got to do. And
yeah. Well, I know Grace. I know her family. Her mother and father are amazing, and you're surrounded by great people. So it's no surprise that you listen to them, and that's good. Colleen, thanks so much. I'd love to have you back again sometime.
Okay, I would definitely love to.
All right, terrific. Thanks for your time. Thanks for you guys as well. Don't forget about us. You follow us on Facebook and Instagram and wherever else you follow people. And like us when you get a chance to like us. We even like to hear from you in terms of a review. We're not afraid of those either. The Behavioral Corner. Tell a friend. Take care. See you next time.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. we offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.